welcome to the show. I'm Eric Murphy.
I'm V. LaBianca.
This is Skeptic Generation, and we need to talk. Hey, V.
Hey.
What's this?
It's spring. And
yes, it is.
I want to be on a beach somewhere, so I wore my beachiest glasses and my beachiest shirt.
Those are the most Geordie LaForge glasses I can imagine. I don't know if they're... Anyway. Okay. Cool. I see that you're all ready. I think I'm...
You're still in winter mode.
You know what? I think I'm going to wear this jacket. Like, I love this jacket. It feels like it's become a part of my brand.
Yeah.
So I gotta keep doing this. But how have you been, V?
This week was interesting. Mostly good. Kind of chill. Yeah, we are going to be doing our patron Discord hangout on, I think, the 22nd. So in a couple of days. And what else? What else is going on?
It's been a rough week for me.
Yeah.
It has. But I'm glad to be here, glad to be doing the show. And it looks like we have one caller. We normally have a full list of lines, but it looks like people slept in a little bit this morning. I know that we had a time change for people who do daylight savings time.
Did you hear about the Sunshine Protection Act?
What? No.
The Senate has passed a bill getting rid of daylight savings.
Really?
Yep. And now it has to go through the House. And if it goes through the House, and if Biden signs it, then goodbye, turning the clocks back.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it.
Would it be this time, or would it be...
I think we spring forward and we fall back. So the way that it's framed makes it sound like going backwards is the correct time, and then we spring forward to get a little bit more daylight.
I like that better.
I don't know.
No, I'm good with that.
I'm not. I need bright light, which is counterintuitive with these.
Yeah,
but
that's okay. Okay.
I'm a plant. I just need lots of water.
I love you anyway.
Out of my big mug, and I need sunlight, and then I'm happy for the most part.
Okay.
Add some whiskey in there, and then I'm happy.
Yeah, you guys, it's one of those days, but we are going to do our absolute best.
We're chill, you guys.
It looks like we got a few callers, but if you want to talk about what you believe and why, or you have a friend, cousin, uncle, brother, parent that you want to call on the show, today is the day. 585-526-8774 or 585-LaMurph. You can call in on your computer by going to tiny.cc/callSG, and we would love to talk to them. As always, theist callers are usually going to get priority. That said, if we don't have that much more... Oh, a regular thing. How about we do a regular thing? This show is brought to you by you. It is your support that keeps the show going. If you want to support us or get an ad-free version of the podcast, of the live stream, you can go to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. And it really does help. Also, we are going to be bumping up our gear this year. We want to get a producer. And so we are going to be putting super chats towards that. If you don't want to wait and you want to help out in some way, there's also that link to the Amazon wish list where I put most of the gear that I could find on Amazon that we're going to be getting and putting it there. But no worries, we're going to be knocking stuff off that list as we go. Anything else? Like and subscribe, hit the notification bell.
Man, we don't say that often, do we?
We don't, and you know what? We really should.
I mean, it is the YouTube way. The one thing
what if I did it just like at the end of every call, if we just used that? That way it would be at the end of every clip.
We can brainstorm. We can brainstorm. One thing, though, you guys, just so you know, like YouTube has been having some issues kind of encoding the audio, and it looks like the video as well sometimes. So if you're having a little bit of choppiness or clicking, we can't hear that on our end, but we have determined that it is a YouTube thing. We do our best to get rid of that in the audio for the clips that we put out, and also for those podcast episodes and the ad-free version of the live stream that are available to patrons. So those will be fixed as much as we possibly can, and we're troubleshooting on our end to see if there's something we're doing. But yeah, bear with us. We think it's just like a YouTube server thing.
Yeah. But as we said, we do a local recording of all of the audio and all of that. So it should be much, much nicer for the clips and the podcast. Ready to move on to our first caller?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Who are we talking to?
Let's talk to David in North Carolina.
Sounds good. David, let's see. They, in the notes it says, value of mysticism, religion, and science are branches of mysticism. David, what you talking about?
Hi, hey Eric, hey V, how you doing?
So how do you define mysticism first? Because I'm thinking Doctor Strange.
Well, I tried to put the most click. I suppose I don't mean. Hopefully, I'm not being deceptive, but I tried to find the most clickbaity way to put it.
We got clickbaited.
That's okay. If you've seen our clips, we respect that. Game respect. Yeah. You know,
game respects game.
Game recognizes game.
Yeah.
So hit us.
While it would. While it might be simpler if I go, oh, here's my definition of mysticism, I think it'd be more maybe productive if I started with saying, if I started by discussing what brought me to that perspective. A book that I read years ago, Dance of the Wooly Masters. It was an introduction for me to a history of the last 200 years of physics, and it was. One, I mean, I've been studying world religion, but it was a interesting comparison of the development of Buddhism and as a mysticism and the transformation of physics in the turn of the century. But in doing so, it illustrated how religions start as psychological science, and then they develop into a technology for living.
Well, I mean, depending on how you define those things, yeah. The thing that this makes me think of is I'm reading a book right now called Witchcraft in the Western Tradition. And one of the things that they did to kind of define magic as opposed to things like religion and Christianity was to put it in this own category of bad studies of things. And then they were like, well, science also studies things and does things we can't explain, but that's beneficial. That's motivated by good things. So there's the science category of the good kind of magic that we're trying to do, and there's the magic alchemy category. No, alchemy, astrology, those were all lumped into the science category because those were A, done by guys and not women, and two were A and B were considered like motivated by good reasons, and so that
what was in the bad category?
Folklore, doing spells,
herbal
remedies, magic from midwives, all of that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Sorry, we're a little. David, help us out here.
Yeah,
I'm
because you're starting with a category of which segregates your mainstream religion from your folk religion in the first place. The title of witch and the title of religion are ideologically opposed. Well, I shouldn't say opposed, but socially, maybe more like socially opposed. I mean, we're talking about the orthodoxy versus the folk religion categories. They're not innate to the workings. Witchcraft is derived from folk religion. One might say witchcraft shapes folk religion.
Yeah, it can be. In fact, most witches back during the burning times were Christians who incorporated some of their, folk religion, either if they were pagans previously or lived in pre-Christian societies.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're kind of like all over the place here.
Yes, David. So here's my issue. It seems like your central thesis is just a little too.
My central thesis is taken from actual anthropological studies, and the term mysticism is highly misused by both most people and by atheists to
David
mean bullshit.
Yeah, well, that's why we needed to start by defining mysticism, and you said that it wouldn't be as beneficial, but we went on this.
Well, I did then go on to define it as a psychological science. Okay,
so I really don't know where to go with that. I would push back simply in that it seems like it's overly simplistic, but I think that I would need to have a sit down and kind of root out, where to go from there and why that's important.
Yeah. David, we do enjoy talking with you, but it feels like what your calls tend to be is you kind of given a little bit of a book report on something you read, which is fun and absolutely cool, and I think would be really useful in like the Discord or Facebook, but we really want to talk to you about something that's deeply helpful for you.
Because I'm in my 40s. My mother was an educational psychologist and a doctor of educational psychology, a school teacher. You guys are in your 20s, I suppose. But it ends up being a book report a lot because you you guys are unfamiliar with Julian Jaynes. You're unfamiliar with Maslow. You're unfamiliar with.
Wait, we're unfamiliar with Maslow? How do you know that, man?
David, I went to college to become a school psychologist.
I talked to you about Maslow on the call before.
Yeah, and
you guys acted like again.
Okay, David, I've had much older people who have specialties in different areas call in, talking down to us or telling us that you need to talk at us because you're older than us isn't going to get you anywhere. Not to mention, I went to college to become a school psychologist. I do know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I went down that path and I went down psychology. So in order to say, no, David, this is a radio show, essentially. Right? David, think about this as a radio show, right? We need to stick to that format.
This is recreation for me, not my job. So I'm not going to spend a great deal of time formulating what I'm saying to match. You're the host.
And then we'll find people who will spend a little more time. David, thank you for calling.
Or you could engage me and ask questions, and challenge me with differing opinions.
Yeah, I don't really.
That's the thing, David. We do want to hear your opinions on things, not talk about books, just because that's more interesting for people and for us, frankly. So if you do have strong opinions about a thing, feel free to call in and we can talk about it. But that's kind of the format that we're looking for. So thank you.
Take care. It sounded like the thesis was really, I define mysticism as a psychological science. Come at me or challenge this idea. But the thing is, it's just so broad in that regard, and it seems very overly simplistic.
Well, if your argument is going to be, I read this in a book and I agree with it, cool. Let's then talk about how you engage with it and what your thoughts are about it, because otherwise, if we say, well, we don't agree with that, your answer is going to be and has been, well, I read it in this book. So it just becomes kind of this circle of going back and forth of, well, this was in the book, therefore and you haven't read the book, so you don't know. It feels like I think David really wants to engage with us. I really do. I just think they're doing it in a way that isn't really conducive in the format of the show.
Exactly.
Right. Also, I said man earlier. David does go by they, them, and he, him. So throwing that out there, if that was
not your preferred pronoun.
Not preferred, then apologies there.
All right. Let's move on. Who do you want to talk to next?
Let's talk to Relic.
Yeah. Relic is a reliable caller, and we're glad for that. Relic in Texas, it says what you're calling about in the notes doesn't think the belief in afterlife is inherently harmful. Relic? What?
Hey, Eric. Hey, Z. Hopefully I sound a lot better to y'all today. I'm trying a new setup, so there's there.
Well, it sounds beautiful to me.
It sounds so good. I love it so far. I've been spending as much time as possible trying to clean your audio after the show. It's going to be much nicer this episode. So cheers.
Okay.
So, Relic, you want to talk about the harm of believing in an afterlife? Is that about right?
Just is the belief in an afterlife inherently harmful?
Yes.
I don't necessarily believe it is, because I'm not going to pretend that there isn't like a way to like make it harmful, but to say that believing in an afterlife at all is a harmful idea, I don't think that necessarily follows.
Well, let's see. If you think that someone is going to live after they die, I think that could drastically influence the way you grieve that loss. I think it could drastically influence the way you treat people. I think there are plenty of people who did wrong by someone who passed and are hoping to make amends and apologize in the afterlife. And since I don't believe in an afterlife, I think you're robbing yourself and them of the opportunity to do that while you still have, while you're still alive. So I feel like things get left undone. And then on top of that, because we don't have any reason to believe that there actually is an afterlife, you wind up grieving twice. Because if you find out that it wasn't true, then they all died again. And this time you're not going to get to see them. And it's something I've seen so often that I think that it's inherently harmful. V has been wanting to chime in. Yes, V.
So I think that this line of argumentation is dangerous for two reasons.
Okay.
The first reason is that this is very Christian-centric, this argument. For example, I would argue that reincarnation is a type of afterlife. Mm-hmm. So you die and then you come back to life as someone else, something else.
Yeah, and that is also inherently harmful.
But the reasoning you just gave doesn't hold up to that version of it, because there's no guarantee that you're going to meet the same people that you met in your past life.
Absolutely. It's inherently harmful for another reason, actually. It's inherently harmful because it is used to uphold a caste system. If you are in a lower rung of society, you were born into it, you deserve it. It's used to justify the segregation and subjugation of a people.
Some versions, for sure. I think though
that's enough.
Well, is it though? Because it's the second component there, the second piece where this could become concerning for me, mm-hmm. is what if we pointed to a few people who said, there is no afterlife, therefore we are not important enough to continue living, or this life is all we have, and that means we're finite and not important, therefore I'm going to go on a murder spree. Like, there are people who will take any ideology, any worldview, and turn that into something harmful.
That sounds like whataboutism.
No, it's the concept of, hey, every belief mm-hmm. could be taken to an extreme that is harmful. Mm-hmm. Some might be more predisposed to that, in which case we can have that conversation. But saying this is harmful because what if some people think this other thing could be applied to anything, and so becomes not a useful argument about the afterlife for me.
I hold on. Is this a pragmatic argument about the usefulness of believing in an afterlife, or is this an ontological statement about whether or not it exists?
No, I think that we can't make an ontological distinction about whether or not the afterlife exists based on how it would impact us.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is the reason that you're giving for an afterlife being inherently harmful could be applied to anything. Therefore, your statement, in order to be consistent internally, would have to be any belief system about death is inherently harmful because some people could take it to a harmful place.
So what if I amended that to inherently dangerous?
Then, I mean, it still applies.
I don't think so.
Relic.
Is driving a car inherently dangerous?
Yes.
Okay. Does that mean that everybody who drives a car gets into an accident and gets hurt?
No.
So where's the inherent danger if a couple people get hurt?
I'm very confused now. That might be me. Relic, I do want to hear what your thoughts are here, though, because I don't want this to be a two-way conversation.
No, it's perfectly fine. And you know that, Eric and V, I respect your opinion and I value your sides of this argument. From from where I am, and I have a belief in an afterlife, but I used to believe in an afterlife under a different belief system. I used to be a young earth creationist. That's just what I was born into.
Yeah.
And that I would see as inherently harmful, because it's not belief in an afterlife that's making up a scoreboard and how much you can do before you get to go to the next place.
Yeah.
In the way that I treat the afterlife now, it's you honor the living as well as the dead. And that it's not a matter of will you see them again, because that's a matter of cosmic occurrence or cosmic fate or what have you. But if people passing on, you can honor them just as well when they're here as much as you can when they're gone.
I agree.
It doesn't necessarily have to be something that, like, for instance, like the car scenario, isn't inherently dangerous if not everybody gets into a car accident every time you get behind the wheel. And there's those few that I'm going, I don't think that follows exactly, because it's not like that. It depends on the religion you're born into or the type of beliefs you were taught about the afterlife. For instance, Islam and Christianity is very different from someone like myself who practices paganism or shamanism or druidry. There is a lot more hands-on with the living instead of trying to follow your book to its conclusion.
So I don't know.
What about let's come up with a hypothetical religion where the afterlife is a thing, and you get to engage with people in that afterlife.
Okay.
So it is similar in that you go to a place and you meet the people that you knew in real life. But there is an emphasis on if you meet somebody who you did not speak kindly to or act generously towards or have empathy for in that afterlife, that is an uncomfortable situation for you and for them. Therefore, the doctrine of this imaginary religion was to make sure that you acted with as much empathy and humanism as possible in this life to avoid that discomfort in the afterlife when you saw them again.
So I will absolutely accept that. I just don't think that matters, because you gave an example, which is fantastic, of a way that it would work.
Right.
I'm not saying that it doesn't work all of the time in every situation, but I am wanting to outline and underscore the inherent danger of the belief itself. That not that it could be okay, but that there's always going to be a danger there. There's always going to be, some level of danger or harm that you could suffer from. Like honestly, I think that it rises above the level of room noise. I think that promising something to people that they are not going to be able to benefit from.
Eric, I just want to push I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
I just want to push a little bit back on this, because in that manner of thinking, isn't every ideology inherently harmful?
Inherently dangerous, most of them, yeah. There are a couple that are, true-ish.
Thank you.
I don't know.
That was my point. My point
I've got to think about that.
Yeah, because here's the thing. I think that an afterlife is not something you should believe in because it is unfalsifiable. And there is no way to determine whether or not an afterlife exists, because you don't get there until you're dead and then you can't report back. So for me, the reason I reject an afterlife is not because of its harm, but because if I'm being consistent with my view of the world and how I synthesize information, I can't accept it because it's unfalsifiable.
Actually, that's a really good point. Relic, I've been talking about the effects of believing in a thing, not whether or not that belief is justified. Are you under the impression that the results of this conversation could justify believing in it? Like, if we were to walk away from this and you get reinforced this idea that a belief in an afterlife is not inherently harmful, does that make it more likely to be true for you?
Okay, so this is going to be in 3 little parts, and I'm going to make sure to keep them to just quick points.
I asked you like 5 questions. If you can keep it to 3 parts, I think you're doing solid.
One, I don't think it justifies it. I don't think that it immediately justifies it. Does it reinforce my belief that it's not inherently harmful? No, it doesn't, because the way I've come to it, I believe I come to it through first-hand experience. So that's what solidifies it for me, because I know it's there and I interact with these things. 3, I just don't want anybody to feel like because they have a belief in an afterlife that they're causing some inherent harm, or that they're holding some position that is inherently harmful, because I think that point in itself is incorrect and uncharitable.
Fair, but it makes for a really good starting premise for an argument. And it's fun to have. You may be right about the whether or not there's inherent harm. I think I perked up a lot more in hearing you saying that you have experience in an afterlife because you deal with these things. Mm-hmm. There's so much meat on that bone. The fact that we've been fighting over the scraps of this other part of the conversation kills me. So can we dive into that much meatier thing?
If you want, I'm not hiding anything.
Absolutely. Relic, what afterlife did you interact with? Why do you believe that was what you experienced? Like, lay it out, because that's very curious.
Okay, so first thing, I want to point out that I didn't call in for this fact, so that I'm not prepared to talk about this, but I am more than willing to answer any question.
Would you rather call another week and have time to prepare?
No, I'll go off the cuff. I'm not scared of talking about my beliefs.
Okay, I'm not trying to bully you into it. You know, we do have the show is going to keep going. So if you want to have this conversation now, I'd be happy to. Okay, so
ask me anything.
Okay, what did you experience? If we can put it in a nutshell.
I already talked about Freya once, I believe.
Yes.
And Freya was sort of my gateway to these experiences, because when I first started, at that point I was an anti-theist and had been an anti-theist for 2 years. Atheist experience and Arnral being my bread and butter, and me reading up on the foundational falsehoods of creationism or whatever. I forget the name of the book.
Yeah, Arnral's
it's a good book.
I've got it in the other room. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good book, and it's a definite heavy disapproval of young earth creationism and creationism in general on that level. But when I had a literal goddess walk into my room in front of me and my wife, having both of our attention, and then she proceeds to start talking to both of us, it kind of threw me for a loop.
So, V, can we make a note to put the link to that clip under this? That way people who want to watch that call can catch up on that?
Yeah. For anybody who's curious, anybody who calls in multiple times, all of their former calls are always linked in the description. So you have all of the library of all of that.
V's the one who does that, so V, thank you. Okay. So Relic, I'm sure you know that we don't believe the whole a god is walking.
Oh, of course.
Right. So what would convince us that you experienced an afterlife? And if it wouldn't convince us, why does it convince you?
Okay. One, I'm not expecting to convince you. I don't think I really can. This is something that just happened. Like, for me, it happened to me, and I had this experience. And like I said before in another call, I don't hold any ill will or like some sort of like, I don't hold anything against anyone who doesn't believe in any sort of afterlife or anything. The thing is that something interacted with me, and that is why I believe in it. Through like secondary things. For instance, she led me into shamanism in general and druidry, respecting nature, journeys, and that sort of thing. and it's been an incredible experience. I have talked to multiple types of spirits, have interacted with multiple types of spirits, and it's something. Yeah, I understand it's a little wild, but
I'm not hearing anything about an afterlife yet, though. That's kind of what I really want to know about.
Are the spirits your proof of an afterlife?
No, when you go on these journeys, you do travel into that spirit world.
Okay, so
in my belief system, you can literally, if someone were to pass away, you could literally sit down and try and go speak with them.
Okay, so like the
got it,
like the Odyssey,
or like Kat Kerr.
Well, we both went very different directions with that analogy, but yeah.
More like shamanism.
So Relic, have you heard of Kat Kerr?
Actually, no, I have not.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm going to do this to you.
No, it's fun.
Okay,
go on.
So Kat Kerr is a YouTuber and a pastor who fancies herself a prophet of God. They've written multiple books about how they've been to heaven, how they interact with angels, how they've interacted with Jesus, how Jesus made them time travel to them back to watch all these different events while Jesus was traveling with the apostles. She has incredibly specific, detailed accounts of really, really funky heavens.
Apparently, Christopher Reeves teaches you how to fly like Superman.
Yeah, if you've seen The Good Place, where everyone learns to fly, that's essentially it. But Christopher Reeves teaches you.
Yeah.
There's so much there, and it is pants on head crazy, dude. I highly recommend you look it up just for the laughs. But would you take someone like Kat Kerr seriously?
Two things. One, it depends. It depends on the religion that someone along that side just subscribes to, and if that doctrine that they subscribe to comports with reality. For instance, Christianity is mostly debunked from the beginning onwards to water being pre-existing before how the cosmos created everything being out of order, yada yada yada, into infinity, the flood. There are
Relic,
things.
Relic. I like that definition of it would be disproven if it did not comport to reality, or rather, you would believe it if it did comport to reality. Correct. But I feel like there's this. I don't know. Like the things you are describing feel very much like they're in that same vein for me.
Not so much for me. I think that Kat Kerr's nonsense claims, because I honestly, if you watch Kat Kerr and you are convinced that they went to whatever weird wonky heaven, like they do guest appearances to tell people what they're going to experience after they die, and there are just like the public transportation system. I mean, it is really, really detailed. Is unfalsifiable.
So, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's unfalsifiable. You could not, check heaven to see if Kat Kerr was right. It just infers that heaven is real, and that, because of that, it falls in the same category. It's not as funny when you say it, though, because while Kat Kerr sounds very, very meaningful, it is, super, super detailed, and you haven't given us a lot of details, but that's where it seems.
I can give you one of sorry.
No, that's okay. I was saying that's where it seems similar to me, though, and I don't take Kat Kerr seriously, and I don't think you should take Kat Kerr seriously. I'm not taking what you're describing as seriously, and I don't think you should either. And so that's why I'm butting up against this. I know it sounds rude, but I'm trying to be consistent. I'm trying to...
Oh, no, I completely understand, Eric, and I don't want you ever to think that, I'm thinking that y'all are trying to dunk on me. That's not what this call is about. This is about dialogue.
Yeah.
I can give you one solid proof that threw me for a loop, and it's the thing that actually sent me over the edge.
Okay.
For instance, when I was journeying yes, I'm going to call it journeying. But when I was journeying,
Were you doing
I
any drugs,
ended up
by the way, or meditating?
No, I don't do any drugs. I don't drink. Call it leftover indoctrination from my last actual drug.
Okay. Well, what about? Is it a form of meditation? Is it
It is a form of meditation, but there is a little bit of gosh, I don't want to really say it, but I'm going to go to because it's honest. There's a little bit of mysticism attached to sitting down, lighting up the candles, getting your drum and going to this place. But I want to share something that happened to me, and you don't have to take me on my word for it, and that's perfectly fine. But this is something that I believe happened, and it's something that did prove it for me. I was journeying, and a man approached me wearing this weird attire, and it strangely, curly hair, tall dude, had a hat on, and he led me to one of my guardian spirits. I ended up seeing him a second time, and I finally got curious, and I said, "Hey, who are you? Because you've been here twice now, and I keep seeing you, and you keep coming to me first, so what's your deal?" And he just looked at me, snorted, and said, "I'm Diomedes," and let's leave it at that, and then went on, like with a bit of a huge accent. And I didn't know who Diomedes is. And so I'm there, and I Google who Diomedes is, and there is a statue of Diomedes, and it is exactly as I saw him in the journey.
Is there a chance that after seeing that statue, you may have revised a little bit what you remember?
I never encountered that statue before, and I swear I have not changed a single thing about it. But once again, you can't take my word for that.
Well, and also, here's the thing. There are two parts. The first is a whole lot easier to go at, and that is that as time passes, especially if you're trying to look for those similarities, you find them, and it becomes a whole lot easier over time. It is not a you thing. It is not a dishonesty thing. It is a human brain thing. Right. It just happens.
His name was spelled exactly how he spelled it to me.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So the other piece of that is I have done stuff like that. When I was on my spiritual journey before I landed on atheism, I would meditate, and I would both meditate with and without the use of drugs. One of my favorites was Salvia Divinorum. I'd get a sitter, I'd meditate for about 3 days, and then I would, take salvia, I'd smoke it, and I would, as you're saying, journey. My experiences are some of my most favorite experiences that I've ever had. That said, I don't think that they're real. I take them as experiences, sure, but they're not ones that map to reality. And because of that, I put them in a different category. And the same has been true for, meditation-induced things that I've experienced. I've thought that I was flying, and the, subjective experience of it, I'm not going to deny that was fantastic, but did it map to reality? No.
Can I ask a question?
Anything.
Relic, you said at first that you met Freya, and now you're talking about Diomedes. Are you suggesting that there are multiple pantheons that are simultaneously true? Because they come from completely different polytheistic religions.
Well, Diomedes doesn't come from any religions. He was a general.
Well, in
or an admiral.
In the Trojan War, which is part of the Greek and, Greco-Roman mythology.
Well, I don't necessarily... Okay, so there are two things. First of all, when Freya first came to me, I asked her, I was like, okay, your name is Freya, so are we talking what? Are we talking Norse mythology? Like, are you telling me that Thor or Odin or all of them are real? Because this is sort of absurd, was my actual wording. And she looked at me, snickered, and said, not exactly. From what she's told me, she is not Freya as described in Norse mythology. She is the spirit that Freya was based upon.
So what you are saying then is that, and this is just me interpreting, and I know that this is you interpreting something that you say you've experienced. These different gods and heroes and characters in these different mythologies are actually not those gods, but are spirits in the underworld that you have come across?
No, the only one from Norse or anything like that I've ever come across was Freya, and she said, no, not Norse mythology. I am the idea that character was based on.
You know, it kind of sounds like a blend of, what was the caller last week?
Idealism?
No. They belong to a very specific religion that... Baha'i.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of like a mix of Baha'i and kind of a Jordan Peterson-esque kind of...
Well, here's the thing. I am very curious about where these experiences intersect with, say, my friends who are Norse pagans, right? So
right.
That would be an interesting conversation to have with one of them about, hey, is Freya actually a goddess? Is Freya a spirit who I've interpreted as a goddess? Is it just the embodiment of nature? Like, the problem, Relic, here is not that I don't believe that you have this experience or that you believe it. The problem is that I'm getting a different version of this goddess from you and from my pagan friends and from my pantheist friends who utilize it, from my Wiccan friends who worship Freya as the embodiment of certain ideals in their witchcraft. Like, there are so many different interpretations here that when we talk about it, it becomes very tenuous, especially if, like you said, what we're looking for is something that comports with reality. We have no way of knowing if this comports with reality, and that would be if this was the only claim alone. But because we have so many conflicting claims
and
about
they can't
this
all
character,
be right?
Right, exactly. They can't all be correct.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So if somebody, if person B were to come from the other room and say, I just talked to Freya and they told me that Relic's a liar, who should I believe and why, right? What criteria? If somebody comes up and says, hey, Relic, I just had this experience where I talked to a spirit, what criteria are you going to use to determine whether or not that person actually experienced it, or are you just going to believe them on face value?
Okay. First thing, when you do ask them, if you ask them, I think you're going to find out that I'm probably more in line than you think, because there are a lot of sects of the Norse, back when I first started searching into it, that have already come to that conclusion that the gods are more tenuous spirits that the text was based on, and that they are honoring the concept of that god. The second thing, how can I judge? I can't go up to every single person and be like, hey, explain your method to me, explain what you're doing, and that's not really fair, and I'm not going to take away from anybody's experience because I don't know exactly what Freya's doing on that side of thing. All I know is how she interacts with me, and like I said, I'm not about to push that on anybody or tell anybody that this is what the goddess says. Believe me, she's not a goddess, she's a spirit. Do as I say, because that's when we start getting into Jim Jones territory, and I'm not going there.
Well, one of the best ways to make sure you don't wind up in Jim Jones territory is if you use a criteria that you can reliably count on to determine whether or not it's true.
Which is where we get back to, is the belief in the afterlife inherently harmful? As a belief, no. As a method for it, if you are accustomed to and make it a point to believe things that are unfalsifiable, that is inherently harmful, because that leaves...
And I believe that as well.
Right. So it feels like... But if you believe that as well, then do you think that somebody who is listening to this conversation would feel more justified in believing what the spirits that are unfalsifiable to anyone else are telling them? And would that cause harm in certain circumstances? Do you know what I mean?
Okay, then let me add one thing to my statement.
And then we're going to move on to the next call, because
that's perfectly fine.
Because people took me up on the offer, and now we have a bajillion callers, and I'm very excited about it.
Okay. To the audience and to Skeptic Generation,
like and subscribe.
Yes, like and subscribe. Buy the Book of Eric as many times as you can. Support the channel.
Link in the description.
Yeah. But one thing, if you believe in an afterlife, if you believe spirits are talking to you, apply secular humanism to the spirits. If what they want is harmful, they're not worth talking to.
So I get where you're coming from. My advice would be, first, if you're hearing voices that are telling you to do harmful things, you need to get help.
Exactly.
That regardless, if you are hearing voices and they're not saying harmful things, you should probably investigate that.
So get yourself evaluated. Okay.
Well, not just get yourself evaluated. No, just look into it. There are so many different possible causes for that experience to happen that if you don't look first, if you don't check all of the possible options, then I don't think you're justified in coming to the conclusion that the one that you want to be true is true. And that's tough. That's tough. And if you have a whole bunch of competing options and there's no way to tell, then the best answer is, I don't know. That thing goes in a bin of, I cannot rely upon that as a source for reality.
Exactly. So, and I just want to say one more thing to both of y'all. Thank you for taking my call as always.
Yeah.
And like I said, y'all guys rock. You're always respectful, and more people need to call into the show and see what's going on the atheist side if you're a theist.
Relic,
appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you, and we're just going to keep pushing back on you because it's fun. Glad you keep calling.
Okay, that's fun.
All right.
Have a great day.
Bye.
You too. Can we talk to Jack really quick in Wisconsin?
Jack?
Yeah.
Sure.
So
hold Jack up.
Yeah. Hey there, Jack. So it says in the comment, in the description, we don't have to do it necessarily. It says in the description you want to talk about your interactions with conspiratorial family members. And
yes, I do.
I want to have this conversation, but when it comes to things like anti-vax and really, really dangerous stuff that's in the description, we are going to get demonetized so hard, so quick.
Oh, no, I didn't even think of that. That's totally understandable.
Jack, it breaks my heart. So here's what I want you to do, okay? In the description for this video, there's a link to the Discord. We're going to be doing a Discord after show after we do this episode, and I would love to talk to you there because I think this is a worthy conversation. It's just one that's going to get our asses demonetized on this platform.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, understandable. I mean, I've been very surprised to even hear some of these things. Like, she's been listening to podcasts, and I'll talk to you guys later. I don't want to say too much because I completely get where you're coming from.
Oh yeah. Last time we had anything to do with something that rhymes with schmishmortion, like it was brutal. It was brutal for weeks. Anyway, Jack, please find our Discord, and we hope to see you there.
Sounds good. Have a good one, guys.
You too. That was quick, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, yeah. Oh, gosh, I wish. Okay, let's move on. I'd love to talk to Javier. Javier in Florida. It is a veganism call, everyone. Get ready. It says veganism and whether secular humanism has any effect on the view of veganism. Javier, you're live with Eric and V.
Hello?
Hey!
Hi, nice to thank you for letting me on the show. I've been catching up with a couple of episodes, and I'm excited to call in.
Cheers! So I do want to preface this. This is not Talk Vegan, and the reason I say that is because if we take, in taking this call, I guarantee you, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to get a dozen vegan callers, each episode, and have to tell them, hey, we're going to reserve a week or, reserve some time specifically for vegan calls. So we'd love to have this conversation, but just for those watching, just give us time. We can't dedicate as much time to veganism
the reason
as
that
most people want.
this is interesting, Javier, is because you say that you're a theist. And so I have not had very many conversations about veganism with theists. It does tend to be a conversation had within certain atheist circles. So that's why I'm curious about this call.
What gets me is it talks about secular humanism, and there are theists who are secular humanists, but that's not guaranteed. So is this a view of an outside group?
And there are also people who don't call themselves humanists anymore because they are vegan, and humanism excludes things that aren't human.
Javier, who the hell are you?
Yeah, tell us more about your question.
Okay, who the hell am I? Oh, this is I'm Batman, but no, seriously.
So first off, are you a vegan?
No, I am not a vegan, and I wouldn't squarely put myself in the anti-vegan category, but I am maximally certain that I will never be a vegan.
Okay, and when you want to talk about secular humanism, do you consider yourself a secular humanist?
Well, I'm not secular because I'm a theist. But
actually, what if I push back on that?
What if we save that for another time?
Fine.
And get to the question.
Okay.
All right, Javier.
Okay. And so many good conversations, but only so much time in the day. But yeah. So I am a theist. I currently feel most comfortable in the camp of Protestant, although I would say that I am basically, I won't say like on the fence about being religious. I'm more like a little nudge in either direction could probably keep me there. But onto the topic of veganism, I do interact with a couple of vegan, I'll say acquaintances, and I've also been listening to a couple of conversations between atheists and vegan. I know those aren't mutually exclusive categories, but I mean like conversations between atheists and some of whom happen to be vegan. Mm-hmm. And I was curious as to whether or not atheism in and of itself has an effect on someone's view toward veganism, and whether or not secular humanism may add something, subtract something, etc.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
This is a good question.
And I'm going to talk forever. V, please go first. Otherwise, I'm not going to stop talking until we're out of time.
Well, Javier, I want to preface this by saying that neither of us are vegans, although we had like a 4-hour conversation yesterday that ended up with us coming to some interesting conclusions about things. So it's a conversation we constantly have with between the two of us and with our friends, many of whom are vegan. I have a vegan friend, so I do want to preface everything that I'm saying with that understanding. For me, I see the trajectory in terms of reasoning, especially if you started out as some kind of theist, some kind of religious person, moved into atheism, found secular humanism, and became a vegan as a result. To me, there feels like there is a chain of kind of logical steps, like moving towards that not everybody, not everybody experiences, but from my understanding, it starts with humans are special for some reason because they are God's children, because they were given some kind of dominion over the universe, something, or over the planet. And that seems very consistent with very many forms of religion that are prevalent today. Once you leave that behind, and that religion specifically, that feeling of humans being special can continue for a long time, or just in perpetuity if you don't look at it, because it feels like a separate category than whether or not a God exists. But it's intertwined because those two things were taught to you simultaneously. So once you start questioning that, are humans special? Then you have conversations around, well, what might make a human special if we no longer believe in a God-ordained dominion or in a soul? So that becomes a conversation around consciousness or the ability to feel pain or the ability to experience qualia, which is what we talked about yesterday. So all of these kind of categories of things that make humans different kind of come up. And then what you end up doing is looking and seeing, oh, other things fit these categories or seem to most of the time. So then maybe we aren't special. Maybe we are just one more different kind of animal that exists on this planet. And then comes that last piece, which is should we then be treating other kinds of animals, other species, as though they are food as opposed to on an equal playing field, I guess? And maybe that's where I mess up, because that's the piece that I don't have yet, right? I haven't fully gone there. And so, you know, I can't believe I'm saying this, vegans of the internet, if I got that wrong, please tell me where in that chain that went wrong, if that reflected your experience, or, you know, what you experienced in that process from deconversion to becoming a vegan through a secular humanist viewpoint. But all that to say, Javier, does that make any sense? Does that kind of follow for you?
Yeah, it does. It is something that I've been thinking, because I guess you could say I'm currently on what some people would call a spiritual journey. And I've considered basically what you mentioned, you know, where if humans are nothing special, there's nothing magical about them, as I like to put it, then we're really just animals. And because I'm, I may be religious, but my favorite topic in the whole world is biology. So I've had the understanding that humans are animals for quite some time now, you know. And yeah, like I'm very much reminded of that passage in the book of Acts, where I don't remember specifically, it's been a while since I've read it, where like God showed Paul a vision of all the animals on a sheet in heaven or whatever.
That was Peter, but like, yes.
Peter, yeah, sorry. I guess my being on the fence is showing right now, but yeah, where he said, oh, everything is clean to eat and whatever. And even as back when I was more firm on the Christian side, that really didn't mean much to me in terms of not being vegan. I really think that regardless of whether or not you're special and you have divine permission to eat other things or other animals, that's a choice that you should come to on your own based on your own standards of morality where applicable. So I do understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. Eric, thoughts?
Yeah. So I do just want to caveat that what V outlined is a really, really good example of how that path can happen. Lots of people take different routes, but that is definitely the one that stands out to both of us the most, is you know, as the most common. But what I'm interested in is you're wondering whether or not secular humanism plays into it, and if secular humanism has an effect on veganism. So is that still kind of what you want to know? I want to make sure that we're still tracking.
Yeah, you know, I'm not going to presume that you two speak for all secular humanists, but if you are secular humanists, I would really like to hear your opinion on the subject.
Sure. Yeah. Javier, I think you are secular more than you are religious. I think brushing your teeth is a secular activity. I think driving your car is a secular activity. Eating breakfast, going to the restroom, taking a shower, all of those things are not distinctly, specifically religious. That which is not religious is secular. And so I've met many religious secular humanists. You can be that. Secular humanism is just your humanism, you're human, you're valuing human life, but you're not doing it necessarily or only because God told you to. You value human life for its own sake, and you're going to treat it with that kind of compassion and respect. I think that as I've talked to vegan friends, they didn't eschew that. They just expanded it. They went, I want to add more things into this bucket of things that I want to treat with that compassion and respect. Mm-hmm. And so calling themselves secular humanists would still apply, but it was no longer as accurate of a descriptor. They, you know, it wasn't as encompassing as it should be. Yeah. Which is why several people that I know who are atheists, who I know are secular humanists, don't consider themselves such because they've found better descriptors.
Yeah. So secular humanism puts a priority on respecting other people's autonomy, right? And the ability to consent to things, right? At this core, that's kind of the basis of that. And so I think I agree with you, Javier, that every person should come to this kind of conclusion based on their own moral understanding and the way that they have followed those personal ethics, because to suggest that my ethics must be shared by other people just because I think that's right is no longer secular humanism, because it does not respect consent and autonomy. So I think that when someone enters into this worldview of secular humanism and then no longer sees humans as special, just the next step is to offer that consent and that autonomy to things other than humans. So it's just an extension of that for a lot of people. And that's kind of...
Yeah, and other people might define secular humanism as, believing in the primacy of, humans over other creatures. And if that's their definition...
I have never heard that before.
I can imagine that's going to be in our comments.
That would be very interesting. If that's how you define humanism, oh my goodness.
If that's how you define humanism, though, this conversation is not going to apply to you. So we don't, we can't define secular humanism for everyone. All we can do is offer you, Javier, our understanding of it and interact with it there.
Yeah. Does that answer some of your questions?
Yes, it does. Thank you for your answers. And to Eric, I see what you mean when you say that I'm more so secular than religious. And in complete honesty, most of my understanding of the world and my moral system, just speaking frankly, is more so secular. Because, like I said, I don't deny anything that is biologically true about humans or the world or anything like that. My creationist days are far behind me, and
well, that's good.
And my my moral system is, I guess you could say, functionally secular humanist in most cases. I guess with like a big exception that also kind of ties into the vegan question is, for example, and maybe some people will agree with me, maybe some people don't. I value my dog more than a random human, for example, and that may sound like a horrible statement to some people. Maybe some other people disagree.
Yeah, it's honest though,
and it's reasonable, I think, frankly, because what we do here's the other piece of that, which is kind of where that other side kind of comes into play. We grow attached to the people in our location or the things closest to us, right? The availability bias is real. And what that means is that you think you found the one, and it just so happens that the one, your soulmate, everywhere in the world happens to be in your hometown. No, like you've picked somebody because of that availability bias, because of that proximity. And so when you're talking about, I would prefer my dog to a random human. Yes, of course. That dog is closer to you. That dog has more interactions with you. Therefore, you prefer it. In general, humans have more interaction with other humans and certain kinds of domestic animals than they do with animals that would typically be eaten. And so there's this other component here, which is interesting to talk about. Okay, well, it feels more natural for me to prefer humans and maybe dogs and cats than it does for me to equally prefer a cow or a sheep or a pig. But that often gets flipped on its head if you go to certain like farms where they like preserve them and like save them from stuff, and then you spend a lot of time with those like pigs. You're like, oh, actually these are like dogs, right? So I totally get it. If you prefer your dog to somebody you've never met, yes, of course, that's how our brains work. But that also plays into why it's difficult to get to veganism for a lot of people, because they aren't available. They aren't in proximity to the kinds of creatures that we're commonly talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And there's so much more. Honestly, it was a multi-hours long conversation.
And I feel like I'm talking out of my ass too, because I, again, am not a vegan myself, but I get it a lot more than I used to because I've talked about it a lot with people, and I want to continue to learn about it. So,
well, as three non-vegans having a conversation about veganism, if you are a vegan, write down in the comments what you think. Did we all get it entirely wrong? And if we did, how? Let us know. We want to be the best hosts we can. We want to represent and talk about viewpoints charitably and with as much, knowledge as we can, afford it. Javier, can I leave you with one thing?
Sure.
early on, you said that you were kind of a nudge away. You're kind of on the fence, right?
Mm-hmm.
My advice to you is resist the nudge. The time to accept something as true is when you're convinced. And it's nobody gets nudged into being convinced. Take as much time as you need to research these things, to look into it and really come away with conclusions that you feel confident in. And then once you've done that, say, hey, here's where I'm at. Because there are a lot of people who will say, oh, I'm now on this side because I've been nudged. And it doesn't help them in the long run. And so I would much rather you abstain, take your time and research, and come up with a conclusion that you feel confident in. And if it's a religious one, you call back and then we can have a conversation about it.
All right, then. Thank you for taking my call. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully my schedule will let me call back next week, talk about a non-vegan topic. Have a good day, guys.
Sounds
You
good.
too.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Right. Resist the nudge.
I disagree.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I got nudged a bunch of different times in different areas and being like, oh, that's an interesting nudge. I'm going to follow that down that path. Oh, I just discovered something I didn't know before. I wouldn't have gone there if I had resisted the nudge.
So then let me clarify. Follow all of the paths. Just don't become set in thinking that this is what reality is every time you get nudged. Right? Take it tentatively. Right. Take each of those things tentatively. When you were following those things, when you were following all these different avenues that were interesting you, you weren't necessarily saying, well, this is reality and it's, every single time. You were going, well, crap, I need to learn more about this. I have no idea. You were, in the way that I'm trying to describe it, you were still resisting that. It's when you settle into, a dogmatic view of things, that's when I think you stop looking.
Right. Don't let a nudge get you straight into dogma.
Yeah.
Each nudge is one step. You have to take a lot of steps to get to a different place.
Agreed. And by the time you get there, you're not a nudge away.
Ooh, you're always a nudge away, and you're never just a nudge away.
We've said nudge way too many times.
It's a word now.
All right, I picked the last two. Who are we talking to next?
I want to talk to Phoenix.
Okay. Phoenix in Tennessee.
Hello.
Hi. It says in the description, your question is, can the self meaningfully exist to any relevant degree without free will?
So
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Phoenix. This is a depressing topic.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So
Although I would say that
Go ahead.
I didn't include the word meaningfully in the question for a reason, and that's because I also question whether or not meaning exists.
Fair. Do you want to pose the question how you want to, and then maybe we can get into it?
Sure. I mean, it seems to me that free will, almost definitely doesn't exist from what I've looked into.
I know it sucks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But, I mean, in therapy, one of the main things that, I'm, encouraged to do is, figure out the story of my life and who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this question of, well, I mean, is individuality, just a glitch? I mean...
No, I think it's an evolutionary advantage. As you're taking in sense data, you need to make sense of that data to be able to make an informed action, and being able to make informed actions increases your likelihood of surviving, thriving, and passing on your genes. I think that act of processing that and contextualizing it to be able to make an informed decision is the emergent property of consciousness. And that's what we call it. So I think we can be conscious without free will. I just describe consciousness as that emergent property.
It's interesting that you're equating the self with consciousness.
True. I think I'm going.
Yeah, I don't.
You don't?
Yeah, I see those as separate things.
Oh, interesting.
I think that the self is the idea of like your identity, who you are. And I think that consciousness is a matter of like being alive,
Interesting. Okay. So I think that we're going to get more traction on the identity piece than on the just being alive piece, because we're really quickly going to fall into whether or not plants are alive, and it's not.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be
I
as
actually
fun.
thought that immediately after I said that word.
Yeah, it's not going to be as fun. But let's use identity, because the way I define identity is it's the story you tell yourself about yourself. It is an ongoing narrative that you are telling yourself about yourself, and I believe that that is what a person's identity is. So are you asking if that's relevant, or if it can exist without free will? Like, what's your take here, or what do you want to, discuss?
I mean, sorry, can you rephrase that?
Sure.
Can I take a stab at it? Because I think I have a specific question that I would love to build off of what you just said.
Go for it.
So if we, for the purposes of this conversation, talk about the self and identity as the story that you're telling yourself about yourself, to me, that doesn't seem tied directly to determinism or free will. It just kind of is, right? That script in your head about who Phoenix is kind of is just there. And so for me, my question is, how does that, if you agree with that concept of identity, tie into free will or determinism? How is it impacted by that?
I think that's the question I was trying to ask. I think you did a better job of that.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're unified in this question we want to ask you, Phoenix.
The main point is the point I would make about the story that you try to tell yourself is that part of it is the things that you learn and the things that you come to understand through experience.
Sure.
And do you think that anything is true?
Yeah, absolutely. What is true is
okay.
If it comports with reality, it's true.
Yeah. So
yeah, and
do you think that if everyone knew everything that was true, they would just be the same? Like
a hive mind? No.
Well, not exactly like a hive mind, but
that's really an interesting question.
Clones.
It is. I think that because I identify your identity, identify your identity. Let me try that again. I define identity as an ongoing narrative you're telling yourself about yourself. If those, omniscient people still had their own individual narratives, then I would think that they have individuality and they'd be different.
Yeah, but I guess my question is if what is a narrative without a character arc? A character arc is when you believe something that's false and then things happen to you and you realize that it's false.
I have never heard character arc described that way.
I think that that's definitely part of it. But it could just be things that don't really have to do with being true or false. For example, I have ADHD, right? And the way my brain works is part of my experience, and how I've experienced my life is impacted by just the fact that my brain works a certain way or is deficient in certain chemicals, or whatever ADHD is. We're not exactly sure. So I'm not quite sure how that would become a situation where I experienced a thing and thought it was true or false and then was proven otherwise, right? That's just kind of true for me because that's my brain, but it doesn't really have to do with truth, capital T truth.
I guess I separate brain wiring from narrative.
Why? So here's a better way of looking at it. We know that people have personal narratives. So it's not the question of can you have a personal narrative if it's just brain wiring. If we it's we see this personal narrative, and so we want to understand more about it. And so if we come at it as this couldn't be possible, then it takes the fact that we're observing it out of the question, and we shouldn't. We should recognize that people have narratives about themselves that they tell themselves.
Yeah, but I guess that that's a misunderstanding of the question in the sense that my question isn't that do we have these narratives? It's like, are these narratives, like, I guess, true, you know? Do they matter?
Got it.
Yeah, absolutely. They matter to you, don't they?
Well, yeah.
The prior caller's, was it the prior? Yeah, the prior caller's dog means a whole lot more to them than you mean to them.
Yeah.
And, people who are close to you hold you in, higher regard than probably the last caller. It's assigned by us. I think what that kind of begs the question of who needs to give you value for you to feel that value is worthwhile? Does it need to be outside, not human source? Because if that's the case, you might have set yourself up for failure, because how could you ever get it? But if we are the ones who designate value and give that value, then that is where it comes from. There is no higher, more valid degree of value than that. At which point, we view ourselves, we give that meaning and that value. And that is fantastic. Personally, I think that's as high as it gets.
I guess that I don't really see it as like tied necessarily to like a higher being. Although, I mean, I understand that I've been like, conditioned to see it that way, and so that's kind of part of what's sort of residual.
I do,
but
that is. I'm sorry, Phoenix. That is exactly what I had to deal with. So, like, you're playing my song.
But I guess I wonder, like, do you think that if like utopia existed, then people would like, I don't know, like, just not care anymore?
So I think that it totally depends. If people are, people change the way they value things. So I think your example of if utopia existed, if everyone stopped valuing the things around them because they're just in perfect bliss, then who knows? But I don't think we need to really worry about that so much, because we're in this world, in this reality, and that's good enough. If literally no one gave value to you except for you, that's the most important one.
Yeah.
So
there's also something to consider, which is humans are kind of, we have evolved to solve problems, right? That is kind of what we do. That's what our brains do. Whether or not that's, our choice or not is kind of up in the air, but that's kind of just what brains do. And there is a chemical reaction to problems that spikes that desire to fix things, right? And that helps us to survive. For somebody who is unhoused, that problem is very big, and that spike of adrenaline to solve that problem is something that is not existent for somebody who has a home. But if you have a home, then that spike happens when you lose power, and you have to solve that. Or if you live in a mansion, it spikes when you have to figure out, oh no, all of my service people quit, and I have to figure out how to hire more. Or so there is no situation, even in a quote unquote utopia, where our brains would actually not be wired to solve problems and feel those feelings of anxiety and need to make something happen, because that's just how we're wired. So I think that a large part of what we call our identity is what kinds of problems have we solved, what kinds of problems are we good at solving or bad at solving, and what problems are coming down the pike, and how do we feel capable of solving those. And so regardless of where you're at, whether you're somebody who is solving basic needs problems like getting food on the table, or somebody who doesn't have to worry about that, the brain doesn't differentiate really. It just kind of exists and freaks out and reacts. So I don't think that this is like weirdly fatalistic, but I don't think a utopia would fix that. And I think that because of that, the identity piece would still exist.
You know what? You're absolutely right. The way that I've always described it as a volume, you know, if you're going through a really, really heavy point in your life, you turn down the volume, you're less upset about things. You're living in a war zone. I've seen pictures of people, videos of people laughing and the bombs are going off, you know, a sniper fire, you can hear it. And they're just enjoying their lives because they don't have a choice. They've kind of turned the volume to match. And their anxieties, you know, such that they could function. And people keep cranking the knob depending on where they're at.
Right.
And so you're right. I don't think my anxiety would go away. I would just find things to be anxious about.
Yeah, it's just how the brain works.
Yeah.
Which,
Oh, that sucks.
yeah, it's kind of weird and terrible. But we do need to move on because we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, this has been an awesome conversation, though.
Good. It was fun.
Yeah, definitely. Phoenix, thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
Bye.
And this is your
Bye.
reminder to smash that like and subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We'd love to see it. It helps the algorithm. How's that sound? Was that forced?
That was good.
It was super
good.
forced.
I'm
figure it out.
in love with the number of people commenting on the outfit I'm wearing. For those of you who missed it, it's spring, and I feel like I want to be on a beach, so I'm wearing the springiest thing I had in my closet.
I'm gonna make you a painkiller after this episode.
I want a painkiller so bad.
Yeah?
That would
Or like
be
a pina
amazing.
colada?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
But we have time for one more caller. Oh my goodness, we have so many people. Who do you want to take, V?
Ash called in last week, and I don't know if we got to talk to them.
They waited all episode, I think, last week, so we should take Ash. Everyone else in the call queue, thank you so much for calling. We're so sorry we couldn't get to you this week. Please call again next week. In the meantime, Ash in Tennessee, what you wanted to talk about, it says you have a thought experiment. If heaven were real, it might be slavery. We might agree. What do you think? How do you want to propose this?
Hi, yeah.
Hi.
So, can I just start off by saying I've been fans of you guys for years. Eric, you actually helped me get out of religion.
Hey!
You and Jamie both. And I actually showed a friend of mine who she considers herself a witchy atheist.
Nice.
I showed her the clip of you talking about how you, despite the fact that you're atheist now, you still have your rituals.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just like, yes, that is me.
Nice. Nice. Well, thank you for calling in. That's very, very sweet.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to be brief because I know you guys are short on time, but yeah. So to kind of preface it, one day I was scrolling through Tinder and I came to this one profile that had like a picture of her Bible, and in it she had, give me 1 second because I can't remember the verse, 1 Corinthians 7:22, and I couldn't find the exact version of Bible that she was using,
Okay.
but in it said that, you know, for any man who is a slave, the Lord frees them, and any man who is free, they are now a slave to the Lord. And it made me think, and I was just like, wait a second, is it, I wonder if, like, because it, you know, it's talking about, and anyways, if heaven were real, if it's actually just the people who go to heaven are slaves.
So,
and the rules that were given by God were the rules he used for his slaves.
So we're specifically talking about our understanding of the Christian text.
Yeah.
Before we get into it, this person put a, like, on their Tinder.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like, how do you pose with the Bible sexily? You know,
I mean, I can think of a couple ways, but then that would get us demonetized.
I actually got.
Okay, sorry. I'm just.
No.
I am bemused. So there are also he who is first will be last, and he who is last will be first. He who is the least among us shall be regarded as the highest among us. Those kinds of things. So there's definitely a hierarchy, in the way that heaven is described in the Bible. Now,
I didn't know that.
yeah. Also, you need to only look in the New Testament. The Old Testament actually doesn't contain those things. It's really kind of created much newer, which is why you don't find, Jewish people holding those kinds of heaven beliefs, because it's really, built upon in the New Testament. So if you're wanting to research it, I just cut down a lot of reading for you. What else do we have that really kind of describes heaven in that way? You have the tests that are required. It's easier for a rich man to go through the eye of a needle.
No, a camel goes through the eye of a needle.
Through the eye of a needle, then a rich man get into heaven.
Let's pop a rich guy through a needle. So another thing, though, Ash, is that there is a lot of language around being in heaven. And I don't know how much of this is actually contained within the Bible and how much of this is kind of Christian tradition. But essentially, you're kind of just there to serve and worship God, right? And the promise is that you'll enjoy it and that it'll be fun for you or like satisfying for you. But that's kind of what you do, right? It's not like the good place where you go and, live in your own little perfect house and make friends with your soulmates. It's like you're standing in front of the throne of God and you're worshiping God forever.
Yeah.
So
which sounds like a hell to me.
It's kind of terrifying to think about, especially because as when you are in heaven, allegedly, you then either forget about everybody that you loved on earth who did not get to heaven, or you know that they are being tortured in hell and don't care. So your brain literally
you're lobotomized.
You're lobotomized, essentially. So yes, it is horrifying if you take it at its face and actually read what is thought about heaven.
Just try and say holy and Hosanna a number, eventually the words lose meaning. I can't imagine that wouldn't happen in heaven. You're just saying Hosanna in the highest forever and ever and ever. That would just be horrible.
So yes, we definitely do not want to go there. That is not a good place to be.
No, but not everyone who believes that the Bible is true has that take. There are plenty of people who will take that text and treat it as figurative. I actually befriended a pastor who I used to live near who did not believe in heaven. And he was a Christian pastor. Did you know that?
I did know that. Is this the dude?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
He was really, really afraid of telling his congregation.
I would be too if I was a pastor. Yeah. That would suck for him.
But
damn.
And that is specifically called, hold on a second. What's the term?
For no heaven?
Or no afterlife, period.
Annihilationism?
Yes, I said it before you. Yes, annihilationism.
Okay. That, interesting. I've heard very different definitions of annihilationism.
Well, I could be wrong.
Okay.
Either way.
Ash, we need to wrap up. We've got about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But we're glad that we got to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
One of the comments was, Eric, lick the Bible.
This Bible is very old and from a used bookstore.
Yeah, I purchased it at a used. That's not going to happen.
This one.
No.
We don't know if we're the first.
We don't know where it's been. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
All right.
Are you ready to move on to Super Chats?
Yes.
So as we queue up the Super Chats, just so y'all know, all of this, we're going to be, we put these Super Chats towards our goal this year of getting an editing computer and being able to hire a producer. We have plans that my current computer which is getting older, is just not able to handle. It's already not able to handle a good bit of the encoding that's going out to YouTube, which is why sometimes there can be some artifacts there. We're getting on it. Thank you so much for the Super Chats and for supporting us in every way that you can, because we are doing our best to make this show as good as we can.
Yeah.
And to grow it. That said,
never satisfied.
Never. We're going to start with Viper Zang, who shot over $5 and says, "Hello, future producer." Thank you, Viper Zang.
Thank you. Amit Matthews sent $10 and says,
Hey,
a young cousin of mine is thinking about abandoning STEM to become a priest. No.
Ooh.
I mean, I have a brother who's very, very good at math and science and wants to be a camp counselor for a career. And that kind of kills me. So I feel you.
Yeah. Viper Zang, wow, sent another $5 and says, my biggest supernatural experience was always thinking my aunt's orange cat, Jiffy, was named after the peanut butter. Then I learned about Mandela.
Sarah Dye sent $10. Thank you, Sarah. Says, I'm out of my home state getting my pup cancer treatment for the next few weeks. After a tough first week, it is a great comfort of home to be able to watch you two with a cup of coffee. Thank you. And then sent the hearts in our colors. Yay! Sarah, we really, really hope your pup is okay.
Yeah, sending
We're
hugs.
thinking about you.
I love that we can provide that comfort. This is why we do that thing. I love that we do this.
Yeah.
Patrick Erickson sent 219 kroner and says, keep it up, folks. Thank you.
Viper Zhang, wow, sent another $2 and says, utopia will exist when humans don't.
Oof.
I don't know if that I think the definition of utopia has to include somebody who is agreeing that it is one, though, right? Like,
I think that will land us in another half-hour conversation if we really.
Okay, fine.
If we peel at the wrapper on that one. 60-second Skeptic sent 10 Canadian and says, would your humanism informed your skepticism, or that your skepticism? Oh, do we think that our humanism informs our skepticism, or that our skepticism informs our humanism? I don't know that they interact too terribly much. My being a secular humanist has a lot to do with the way that I form my oughts. And, I think I ought to do this and I ought to do that. My skepticism is a tool that I kind of try to use everywhere. And so maybe
it's the is versus ought kind of situation.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess by default, skepticism informs everything, including.
Well, I know that I was a skeptic before I was a humanist, and I do know very many skeptics who are not humanists, but I also know humanists that aren't skeptics. So it's a Venn diagram, and people are all over that thing.
Yeah. Let's see. And Lucas Black sent $10 and says, utopia is perfectly possible. The answer is to make things people love. The answer is to make things people love the main solution. Someone who loves farming wants to farm. It is his entertainment, what he strives to do and lives to do. That would be nice.
Sounds like communism to me.
Well, honestly, I think it breaks down when you get to like an office space scenario. Because
yeah,
I'd probably like to do nothing.
Do nothing?
I love nothing so much.
That's not true, because we do this.
That's true.
Voluntarily.
Okay, I do love this.
So this is what we would do.
Maybe if we do the show enough, someday we could just do this as a job.
That would be fun.
Yeah, we have real jobs with full time.
Real jobs.
Well, it's still a small channel, and hopefully someday that'd be nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, this turned out really, really interesting. We had some really cool callers, and I'm really grateful for those of you who took up the mantle and went, hey, you know what? Eric said I should call in, and called in. Thank you. Thank you so much. You made this a fantastic episode. V, is there anything else before we head out? We're going to hop over to the Discord.
Yes, we are going to do an after show real quick. We just got another $10.
Oh.
From Micaiah Snow. Says, I just wanted to say that whenever I think of the Christian heaven, I can't get past the paradox of hedonism. Micaiah, you should call in next week.
Yeah, let's talk about the paradox of hedonism.
All right.
But in the meantime, we're
glad we had this talk.